Hello everyone, I'm the EFC, this is Blue Lines TV. Welcome to the match review of our disappointing 2-0 loss against Arsenal. And what's really frustrating is the fact that we've had 1 week's worth of preparation for today's game. And again, we had no solutions for Arsenal. Now of course, I have a lot of sympathy for Sarri, there's a lot of context as well. But at the same time, there can be some valid criticism of Sarri, his team selection, and some of his tactical decisions as well. But you guys, before I get into anything, today's video is brought to you by OneFootball. And in my opinion, the OneFootball app is the best companion app to have if you are a football fan. It's just the convenience. It's so easy and quick to get the information you need. It helps me out a lot to get the lineup news. If I want to get stats on our opposition, if I want to see the transfer news tailored around the club of my choice, the OneFootball app is very useful. And if you want to help me out, in the link in the description below is going to be a download link. Every time someone downloads the link in that description, it does get dragged. So if you want to help me out, download that. But you guys, enough of that. Moving straight into the match review. Now, we all saw the lineup and we all knew already that Emerson and Hudson-Odoi weren't going to start this game. It's frustrating. I'll get into this in detail later on, but to start with things, I'm going to explain the tactics from Arsenal very briefly because I want to get that part of the review out the way. And the system that Arsenal used was very similar to how Spurs played against us when they beat us 3-1. You know, they use a system where they create a lot of overloads, They use quick balls from out wide to really, get in behind us. They flooded a lot of men forwards. And the whole point of this system is the fact that if you score first, this gives you a massive advantage when it comes to controlling the game. Of course, if you score, this means that you can then counter-attack, keep men back, obviously try and stifle us in the middle of the pitch, force us to play our passes out wide, and create a lot of dangerous counter-attacks down the right-hand side of the pitch, attacking Marcos Alonso. And if you can get in behind Alonso very quickly, you disrupt the patterns and shapes of the team. And this is why Sarri has to be braver with the team selection. But the main reason as to why teams like Arsenal and Spurs have used this tactic is because it allows them to go 1v1 against us inside our box. We're not a very big team. We're not a very physical team. We don't win every single 50-50 as well. And of course, if you win the ball back early, if you create a lot of havoc in our half, and when you cause that confusion in our own box, you're going to get that advantage against us. Because let's be serious, it's not as if there's a Kante playing there that's going to win those key 50-50s. And of course, Alonso is a very poor defender on top of being a poor player as well. So naturally, you're not going to be as strong defensively. Arsenal were very smart. They had Aaron Ramsey, for example, pushing out wide, playing between Alonso and David Luiz to occupy Alonso. And by occupying Alonso, this allowed Bellerin to obviously get forward, but Bellerin wasn't getting in behind. He was staying behind Ramsey because he was looking for that quick cross inside the box for the on-rushing players to get onto, or that quick pass in the middle of the pitch. And it's like a lot of our players were in like a no man's land zone because it's like, what players do they pick up? Marcos Alonso, even though he wasn't good today, I do sympathise with him from a tactical point of view because for a very limited player, it's going to be especially harder when he doesn't have that protection. Now, when Marcos Alonso can't really close down the fullback because Aaron Ramsey is pushing out wide, what you're hoping for, what you're really hoping for is for Willian or Pedro to get deep quickly to help out defensively. But there's a reality that fans have to accept, and I don't mean to sound ageist, but they're in their 30s. It's not fair to rely on these guys to press 90 minutes throughout a game. They're not going to do that anymore. And when you've got a poor defender like Alonso, he needs that support. And if you're not giving that to him, this is how guys like Bellerin were constantly able to get forward, not obviously push too far forward, but get in those dangerous positions where they had all the space and time in the world to spray these quick crosses. Now, I was hoping that Arsenal weren't going to be able to press more, but of course, these teams have evolved tactically. They just sat back and played on the counter-attack. And of course, as I said earlier, if they play with those mid-block tactics, which you guys know all about because I constantly talk about already, it forces us to play out wide. And when we play out wide, that's where the issues come into play. Now, the wide area for me is the biggest obstacle we're facing as a team right now because we're not good enough. Now, Aspie's a good defender. As an overall football player, he's nowhere near the level we need down that right-hand side. Marcos Alonso as well. I think he's very selfish in that sense that, we know he's desperate for a goal. He's hit the post how many times? He hit the post again. But I think that this insistence, especially of hoping that a goal's going to change this season, it's not helping the team right now. Marcos Alonso and those infield runs, as I keep criticising every single time, does absolutely nothing. How many times do you see him push in field to do 1-2s? They rarely come off. And there were so many occasions where I saw guys like Willian and Pedro isolated where they needed the fullback to really bomb forward and stretch the play. They needed that option because they had 2 Arsenal players on them. And it's like, what can they really do? If they're not going to beat those 2 players, they're forced to either put in a really bad cross or pass the ball back. Now, this is where you want the fullbacks to be stretching the play out wide to really help create that space, but they're never there. And that's the most frustrating thing in my opinion. Now, I've always felt at Chelsea, managers have kind of created their own issues because with the squad we have, there's solutions in it. Emerson's there. We've already seen what he can do. We've seen Zappacosta. Now, I'm not a Zappacosta fan at all, but here's the biggest issue we face right now. We don't get goals. We don't look like we're going to score. And I feel like it's the fullbacks that really hamper our chances of getting goals in the game. When I look at our wide players, I see this reluctance to pass out wide. And I kept thinking to myself, why are we so reluctant to play the ball quickly out wide? And it made sense. Number one, if you're like a Willian or Hazard or Pedro, for example, you know that if you play the ball out wide, it means that you have to take up a wide position. And you don't want to be there consistently every single time. You need to play in the middle because that's where you're supposed to make those vertical runs to get on the end of passes. And our fullbacks just don't help with that. How many times when you watch football, when you see other teams, do you see their fullbacks have the confidence to take a man on, have that pace, have great delivery down the flanks as well, have the ability to keep the ball and beat a press? Aspie and Alonso just can't do that. And I don't understand, and personally, I don't really care about what they provide defensively. Now, here's the thing. With Sarri, his point about Alonso and his height can't be taken for granted. It really can't, because he's correct. Look at this game today. Look at the amount of long balls in the box that Arsenal were putting in. How many times do we see teams, really affect us with their set pieces as well? We need someone like Alonso because of his height. And I feel like too many managers at Chelsea create their own issues. We've got the solutions, as I was saying. You have to play Emerson. In my personal opinion, if you play Emerson, you prevent needing to really defend these types of crosses. Prevention, in my opinion, is always the best way to go. And everything I'm saying is linking back to the lack of goals we score. And when you see the lack of goals, that comes down to how slow our players in the middle. And that play is very slow because we don't utilise those wide areas quickly enough. The fullbacks don't get in behind. How many times at Napoli would you see guys like Gulam? Would you see guys like, Husai doing the same thing? We're not seeing that there. Sarri needs to forget about the defensive balance. Let's worry about that when we're winning a game. That's more important. Our attacking players are getting more isolated. This is exactly why Hazard had no one to pass with, because guys like Willian and Pedro were forced out wide the entire game, leaving Hazard isolated, having to deal with 2 guys behind him. He's playing with his back to goal already. It's making it impossible. And it's no surprise why we scored nothing or created anything in this game today. And this links back to a point that Ruben was saying, and that was the point that we aren't making enough runs in behind because that's the only way to get through very compact defensive teams. Now, Ruben is a good point to touch on because even though Sarri does deserve criticism, in my opinion, for his team selection, you have to start using guys like Hudson and Emerson. There's no excuse in my opinion. We have to sympathise as well. We have to. Not only am I going to say believe in the process, you should know that by now. Let's stop being reactionary every single time. Let's remember why Sarri was signed in the first place, and that was to bring a philosophy to the club, a long-term philosophy where we've never had one. And this is why we constantly win things and don't win things for a long time. Sarri's coming to change things. Let's not forget how Klopp started, how Guardiola started. I shouldn't even be saying this because you guys should already know. Let's not pretend that this isn't valid. Now, when it comes to feeling sympathy, the sympathy comes in the form of players not being fully fit. For example, Koffer coming off for Barkley. That's because, first of all, Sarri knows that I have no midfield players. Ruben's out. Fabregas has been sold. Am I going to even get a midfield player this window? I don't even know. So he either has to rest him. And of course, this insistence of constantly rushing players back. Again, I feel like maybe Sarri could have maybe relied on other squad players in the meantime. I think that he hasn't helped things because in the long term, because these guys haven't really recovered to come back fully fit, they're still carrying these small knocks, so it's no surprise why we keep seeing a lot of small and minor injuries this season. But it does take two to tango, and Sarri just doesn't have enough options right now. For example, that Ross Barkley substitution really screams to me the lack of options that Sarri has. Now, of course, could he have taken off someone else? Well, no. Kovacic isn't fully fit just yet. We needed a new midfield player because there's intensity in our pressing. We're a pressing team. If we don't press, we're going to get battered because that's what happens when teams don't press. I know that Sarri's going to get criticism for using Hazard as a false nine, but come on. Has Morata or Giroud been anywhere near close to being good this season? Of course not. Now, when you think of those guys, they've only really scored in the Europa League most times. How many league goals have they actually got? And when you look at their overall performance, what do they provide? The only good stuff that Giroud has provided this season is when he does come on as an impact sub. Sometimes when he does start games, his overall impact just isn't good enough. But at the same time, you guys, this is going to be a very confusing match for me, but I'm hoping that you're understanding the stages that I'm going through. Everything is linked. All this micromanagement does add up to really make something complete. And there's so many pieces missing in the jigsaw right now. And I think the main area that needs to be worked on especially is the fullbacks. And we could look at Man City. We could look at what Guardiola did when they spent 150 million on just 3 fullbacks. Look how that transformed their entire game. Their wide players, the guys that play in the half spaces as well, they had that support and options as well. The midfield had passing options on top of that as well. It makes a big deal because their fullbacks can play football. They're good on the ball. And to really put an onus as to why I feel the fullback area is the most important area that needs rectifying, he's even used midfield players like Delph and Zinchenko as fullbacks to really tell you just how important fullbacks are today. Alonso doesn't provide anything, and Aspie, in my opinion, doesn't either. In a different world, I would love us to sign someone like a Ricardo Pereira, who in my opinion is like the new Dani Alves of this generation, can play all over the right hand side. I would like to see that. I would like to see Emerson getting a chance. Hell, I like to see Zappa Costa play, even though he's not very good defensively. It doesn't matter. We're not scoring goals. We're not creating for the players on top as well. And there's no surprise that we aren't getting those chances. And I feel it's the build-up in certain areas. People talk about the final 20 metres. I'm talking about the space between after the halfway line. When it comes to really making sense of the build-up and really transitioning into the final third. You're not going to get that with our fullbacks, you guys. They force our power players out way too wide. They don't have any combinations. Their delivery is awful. Their use of the ball when they're getting pressed isn't the best either. They're so one-dimensional in their play as well. They do the same things every time. And I feel this is what makes us such a very limited team. This is why we've become so predictable. And I feel like we have to sympathise with Sarri. We have to use our brains, use them. There's a process. Next season will be completely different when more players come. This team isn't anywhere near close to being ready just yet. When players come back and they're fully fit, Ruben, if we have guys like Alonso, it's even more vital that you have the number 8 breaking the lines, getting forward to get in the box, stretching the play, getting in behind. You're not going to get that from Barkley. You're not going to get that from Alonso. Ruben's the only one. It's a shame that the guy is still out. Still, I'm really frustrated, but that's going to bring an end to today's video. In the comment section below, in particular for this video, I really want to read your thoughts and opinions on some of the points I was making. Let me know in the comment section below, but you know, things need to change, and if we want to start challenging and getting goals, if we want to start helping out the forwards, the fullbacks need to be dropped. Bring Zappa, use Zappa Costa for God's sake, and use Emerson. I'm Nini FC, this is Blue Line CV, signing out.